that looks like I'm summoning a devil or something. Like that looks like a witchcraft symbol. What have I done? Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 22 years, I have about 24. And I'm gonna give it back to Cassie because I am so tired tonight.
I'll be driving tonight, so you know what that means. More bad jokes. I apologize in advance. Tonight we are doing a pattern technique deep dive into Sling Shots, and we've got 4 examples to share. But before I share the first example, what is a Sling Shot, you might ask? And I don't know, defining them is hard, but I kind of like the joke definition I came up with as Alicia and I were prepping before this call started. And it's an aggressive side pass. When led well, there is less aggression, but aggression is needed because of the timing, which we'll talk about later. When it's led poorly, it tends to be very aggressive, and we don't like that. That's why we're here tonight. As usual, the whole night, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or drop them in the chat. Our first example is a slingshot from a dance between Sean McKeever and Jessica McCurdy, and I am going to cue up about a pattern and a half ahead of the slingshot in the video. So once you click on the link that I'm about to share, just watch through to the end of the slingshot and then maybe watch it 1 or 2 more times so you have some context for what we're going to be going over, but don't watch the whole video. Link is in this chat to the screen share. So the first thing to notice for this slingshot in particular is that it's a double handhold and they go into it from a rock and go. So here's the rock and go. And like I've talked about in previous episodes, a rock and go is basically a conjunction of 2 patterns. So instead of having a full sentence, period, space, full sentence, you're doing comma, space, and the way you do that is you turn the anchor of the first pattern into the 1, 2 of the next pattern. And so if we go back just a little bit, we have a sugar push 3 and 4. So now it's going to be going on to count 5. Watch Jessica's back foot. 5 and 6. And so she's landing on her left foot on count 6, and functionally it's count 2 of what would be a pass going into a slingshot. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to talk about that really quick. Now, let us pay attention to the slingshot. I'm going to start by going in broad strokes because there are a lot of elements that go into a well-danced slingshot. And the first thing I want you to pay attention to, we got Sean right here, and we got Jessica right here, right? And then, ta-da! This is some foreshadowing for our episode next week, Trading Places. But if I turn on ghosting, they traded places perfectly. Because we now have Jessica over here and Sean over here. Bloop, 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 bloop. It looked like magic when I do that. I told you the jokes would be bad. I'm so sorry. So, basically, that is to say, like, a really well done slingshot is more of a trading places pattern than a passing pattern. And that's a really important detail to understand, because if as a leader, you're just trying to lob your follow from one end of the slot to the other to create a slingshot, they're either not going to be able to handle it because they don't have the skill set yet, or they're going to completely disengage from you and follow you through sight and not connection.
Yep. Neither of which is ideal.
No, it's really not. All right, so that was soapbox number 1, if you will. Now I want to have you all pay attention to the direction in which Jess is facing based on relative to the timing. So right now she's facing screen left. And then, bam, she's facing screen right. The trick is to understand when timing wise that rotation happens. And it happens starting on count 2 of a slingshot. In this case, it's count 6 of the rock and go from the past pattern, but it's technically count 2 of the slingshot because West Coast swing conjunction, like we talked about earlier. I'm trying not to be confusing. It's probably not
I
working.
mean, I'm getting it.
Okay,
and
cool.
I'm very out of it tonight, so
Sweet.
it's probably fine.
Sweet. I'm using English correctly. That's always a worry for me. Anyways, so when Jess strikes onto this left foot, it's difficult to see because Sean is in between us and her, but we'll have more examples later tonight, so it'll be clearer in other examples. But what's happening is Sean is placing her onto her left foot, centering her axis over it once she completes her weight transfer, rotating her around that axis, and then sending her weight out into a side step. That looks like I'm summoning a devil or something. like that looks like a witchcraft symbol. What have I done? So once again, let's pay attention to Jess's rotation. So she drives forward onto this left foot. She turns, and you can see how much she's really still staying on that axis. And she ends up shifting after the rotation. That is the really important part. The joke we were making earlier that poorly led slingshots tend to be really aggressive is that leaders tend to throw the rotation and the direction into a blender.
Yeah.
And it's like those blend tech commercials. Will it blend? And I guess technically you can blend them. We follows just don't appreciate that.
Right.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah, it's no bueno.
Personally, I will change it into something else. But that's just me.
Yeah, maybe actually that's something we could talk about at the tail end of tonight is tips and tools for follows to dissipate that energy.
Yeah.
If you feel like it's being led in an unsafe way for your body, because that's a really important thing. Okay, so we have covered 2 of the foundational elements of a slingshot: trading places, and the follow pivots on a single axis and then is shot out of the sling, to use the pattern terminology, if you will. Yeah, I hope y'all are laughing on the other side of your muted microphones, because I know Alicia is, but I feel like my jokes are extra sad tonight, so.
They're still entertaining. So.
Okay, good. I try. The next thing I want to draw your attention to is Sean's. Let's start with his own rotation before I move on to frame, because frame is the big scary that we're going to be spending like the whole evening on. So let's notice how Sean is facing screen right. And then he's facing screen left. But unlike Jess, he has a more gradual rotation. However, while his body positioning is helping conduct the pattern, it's really the frame that's doing all of the hard work. So now I want you to pay attention to Sean's frame. And this is only one example of a slingshot we're going to be covering tonight. The next 3, 2 of them are also in open, and then the last one is in closed position. And the idea is the direction of the energy is basically the same across all of the slingshots, but the amount of shaping that the leaders put into it to create the same ultimate footwork out of the follow varies. In this example, Sean does a lot of movement in his frame, which A, makes the lead really clear, but also looks cool. He looks like he's airbending or something. Right? Position 1, just like extension with arms, yes? Position 2, so he's done a huge delayed weight transfer, so his body is leading this way while his foot is preparing to trade places with her. That's a really key element. So pay attention to how Sean's elbows are also kind of indicating that way, while his hands are indicating this way. So he can, I don't know how to describe this shape. But now we get this kind of airplane situation going on. And then we have where the elbows have shifted positions. And then we're back here. We're gonna just go through those shapes real quick. So extended and open, elbows in, leading Jen down the slot, turning the follow. What? Jess. Damn it. Damn it. I knew I was tired. Stretched arms, open, bringing the elbows down the slot while leaving his hands in the direction Jess is coming from. And then this is the moment where he is rotating her. And I want to highlight that this extreme, like airplane tilting to the side, that angle isn't necessary to lead a slingshot. It's just an added element for shaping, but it's not necessary to lead a slingshot. And then we have the equal and opposite out the other end. And just because I noticed it, you can see how this hand, because we can't see the other one, you can mainly see it in this handhold, that becomes a center counterpoint. And it only moves towards Jess just enough for her to finish settling over that right foot of hers. But otherwise, Sean is very much counterbalancing her, equal and opposite. While we're here, do you want to talk about Jess's hair flip, since we actually had a question about hairography?
Yeah, so her hair flip is it's an extended piece of her styling, and it's something that is fairly easy to do, but if you do it the wrong way, it can be really harmful to your neck. Yes. So the thing that she does here is she picks 2 separate stopping points of her head, and that is where her hair is ending. I feel so dumb talking about this.
But it's so true. It's okay. This is important information.
So this is the first stopping point of her head, which is to the side, because she's dropping the chin. And so from that drop of the chin, the stopping point is the side to get the hair to go this way to her left, basically. And then coming up is going to be the second stopping point right here. And that finishes the hair, because if she just stays in that side position, her hair is going to just fall over her face, basically, from where it is. Mm-hmm. But she needs to move it out and then up and over her head, basically. So, you know, there's 2 stopping points, basically, for the hair.
And neither of them are an extreme position. She's just tucking to her shoulder to a comfortable degree and then righting herself, basically. Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, because I do have problems with my neck, a lot of times what I'll do when I am like styling and I have a free arm is I don't do the 2 points. I'll just do the 1 point. So I'll go to the side and then I use my free arm to catch my hair and send it like back over my head rather than whipping my neck all the way back up.
Mm-hmm. And then timing wise, you kind of want to think about it similar to foot strike versus weight transfer after a foot strike. Yeah. You want that head position to be with the strike of the music, and then the hairography that follows through from that head position is the follow through, the reverberation. So it'll look good if you hit the head position on time.
Yeah.
And if you have short hair, do not try to mimic hairography with your head. A, it hurts.
It looks
B,
super awkward.
It looks weird. I speak from experience here because I have transitioned from long hair to pixie to long hair to pixie so many times in my West Coast swing career, and every time I go back to a pixie, I'll just leave that there.
It looks just like a very aggressive, like moving of the head if you don't have the hair attached.
Yeah, and there tends to be this psychological, like, oh, I don't have hair, so I have to be more aggressive with the head motion, which A, hurts more, and B, looks crazier. So it's all a good time.
Anyways, sorry to those of you that don't have hair and or don't care about hairography.
we had a genuine question on the comments of one of our previous videos. So that's why we wanted to cover it. All right, so we have covered trading places, the timing of the follow's rotation, and we have taken a shallow dive into leaders framing. Are there any questions on this particular example that anyone has before we move on to the next one? Feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat.
Yeah, because this is the most basic example that we have of a slingshot. I think the other ones all have different aspects to it that aren't what you would normally be taught.
Right. I would say the only thing is the leader's frame is a little bit more quote unquote normal in the next examples. Yeah. Because Sean is very much stylizing it here.
Right. Well, it's because he's doing it to a very specific hit in the music. And so he wants it to be really sharp, which is why he's getting that like really large frame happening to make sure that like there is as much acceleration as possible.
Right. I think an example I like to use, because once you've set the follow over their left foot on count 2 of a slingshot, you want to engage kind of like tricycle handlebar frame mode, regardless of which role you're in. So as a leader, you have a rounded out, wider than normal, sturdier frame, so there's less delay between arm movement translating to the rest of the body. And so if we look bird's eye view, I'm really good at the bird's eye view stuff. So we're going to ignore this really big tilt down to Sean's left and pretend he's doing this level, so it's more normal. But if we look at a follow bird's eye view, she's facing that way on count 2, and her arms are kind of like this. So we've got tricycle handlebars kind of a situation. As a leader, you basically want to not mess with their frame from this bird's eye view position, and you just want to go and use both of your arms to basically turn the follow around in that direction. So you're both applying pressure in a compression way to that hand and bringing some tension into that hand. So you're driving both sides of the follow's frame at once. And that's what Sean is doing. He's just also adding that the tipping shaping. Yeah. Have there been any questions in the chat?
Nope, not so far.
All right, cool. All right, on to the next one. Our next example, this song will be stuck in your head for days if Alicia and I are any indication. It's of Maxence and Tara. It's an old enough video, you might not recognize either of them. If you have never watched this dance, after tonight, please go back and watch the whole thing, because it's a great dance.
It's also an all-star first place dance. So I feel like apart from maybe 1 or 2 parts, it's kind of more simple, and I think it's a really good example of what an all-star dance should look like for first place.
So link is in the chat. Watch the Sling Shot 2 or 3 times, and then we will get to analyzing. to the screen share. Doodle-doodle-doo. All right, so this example is very similar to the one we just watched, except it's from the other perspective. So we're on the other side of the slot. Also, this one ends in a single open hand hold instead of both hands staying connected. And there is less shaping on the leads part in this example. So I'm going to frame through it once. Oh, this one also starts from a rock and go.
Yeah.
So we have the rock and go here. Pivoting Tara on that foot into the slingshot. Let's see. Let's start with the same kind of trading places examples. So we've got Maxence here, and we've got Tara here. And then they end up here. It doesn't help that the camera also moves. So it's not quite the perfect trading places that we saw out of Sean and Jess. Mm-hmm. However, it is still fundamentally a trading places pattern. Maxence is not asking Tara to traverse that entire distance by herself. Do not eat your follow down the slots. Okay, thanks, bye.
The amount of times that we have said something similar to that.
I know, right? I'd say that is like the foundation of what we teach. We're like, please don't eat your follow unless much, you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And they consent. Basically, that's anyways. All right, so now let's pay attention to Tara's rotation. So we can see again how Maxence is bringing Tara forward onto her left foot, and she's going to do the majority of her rotation on that left foot. And you can see how she's really extending this foot out ahead of her to catch herself, which indicates that most of her rotation was happening over this foot. The only reason she is slightly offset instead of being centered across that line is because it became an open end, which gave her more freedom to choose where she ends up and how she shapes into that position. Mm-hmm. Whereas if Maxence had not let go of Tara's right hand, Tara would have been more centered over her left foot in this moment. And then afterwards, you can see how even though they only have one hand hold, Maxence is still counterbalancing Tara out the other side of the slingshot. Mm-hmm. And there's a lovely center counterpoint in Maxence's right hand and Tara's left. All right, now let's pay attention to Maxence's frame. So we have a similar shape. You can see how like Sean was in this exact same position. We're just now on the other side of the leader for the beginning of the pattern. And you can see how he's driving with this elbow to help encourage Tara down the slot. And he's also bending this elbow and bringing it back and past his own torso, which is further encouraging Tara to move down the slot. So basically, he has both hands. Both hands are giving the same message, which is really important for a slingshot. Yeah. If you have one hand yeeting the follow and the other is like just driving down into the floor, which is a break, the follow is going to be confused and is going to want to let go or disengage. Important details. So then we can see a little bit of that same kind of shape here where this handhold is lower than this one. So it's similar to what Sean was doing with Jess. It's just a slightly less extreme version.
Yeah, it's lower.
Yeah. And this is the point where Maxence and Tara let go of this handhold. And then the rest of the slingshot in this example is led predominantly from, or not predominantly, completely from Maxence's right hand. And what he's doing is he's giving just enough information for Tara to do one weight transfer and then settle. And you can see the moment where he starts resisting her because the hand slows down through space. So it's going fast, it slows down.
I wanted to point out something
Yeah.
with this in comparison to the previous one we just looked at of Sean and Jess, is because of the way that Tara is styling this, she's changing the momentum. So we saw with Sean and Jess, their hips both settled really like past their outside feet. And so it kind of looked like they were, moving away from each other. But because of the way that Tara dissipates that energy going sideward, God.
That was beautiful.
Sideways down the slot, it nullifies a lot of that momentum, and so Maxence isn't countering as much from the hip because there's not as much to counter.
Yep. And we'll be doing an episode specifically on balance in the not too distant future. But one of the ways that you can see that visually is how she has a wide base. She's putting weight on both feet. And if we draw a line up from the center of that, her body weight is evenly split on either side of that line. So she is taking care of the majority of her own body weight in this moment. So there isn't too much weight in the handhold. I really appreciate that even though Maxence is doing that angled shaping, the hands never get lower than her hips. So we go right here. This is as low as that right hand gets, and that's basically the height of her hips. And the lowest this one gets is also there, which is the line of her hips. And that is a reasonable distance that allows Tara to reach and match the connection without having to bend over to meet it. So you can see, like, in this example, it goes a little too far away from her. So even though it's at hip distance, it's just like too far away from her torso, and that's why she's bent over here.
Yeah.
But through the slingshot, Maxence is keeping the handhold within a reasonable range of the height of her hips and waist, which allows her to stay connected. Because if right here, Maxence were insisting on the handhold being here, Tara would have to tip over in order to reach that handhold. Yeah, speaking from experience again. Just saying. All right, is there anything more from this example you want to cover, Alicia?
I don't think so.
Okay. Next example, we have Jess again, but this time with Robert Royston. Link is in the chat. Again, in theory, I've queued it up for like a pattern or so ahead of the slingshot. Watch it about 2 or 3 times, and then we will get to analyzing. To the screen share. All right, so this is an interesting example because we've already talked a lot about how it's really important to have the majority of the follows rotation start on count 2 and finish before count 3, aka before the follow has the foot strike onto their right foot on count 3. This example is more linear, and it comes because of the hand switch. So I want you to pay attention, first of all, to how the pattern is starting with Robert's left, Jess's right. And then it transitions to Robert's right, Jess's left, and they release the other hand. So simply because of that detail, Robert has less fine control over Jess's rotation. And that's really important to understand, because if you're a leader doing a similar handoff like this with a slingshot, you need to not suddenly, once you get this hand and let go of this one almost simultaneously, try to force the follows rotation to be accelerated. Don't do it. No. Just no. So that's the first detail to note. And so what you'll see is, unlike the very first example between Sean and Jess, where her rotation was accelerated, in this example, her rotation is much more gradual because she has much more autonomy over what she's doing. Mm-hmm. She's mainly focusing on hitting the end of her rope and basically hitting something in the music with Robert. It's more a symptom of trust in the connection and in the partnership than micromanaged leading in this example. Let's go back to our main things that we've been highlighting. So we got Robert here. We got Jess here. And then we got Jess here, and Robert here. Let's turn on the ghosting. It wasn't a perfect trading places, but it was mostly a trading places. And the reason that works at this speed is because A, Robert is appropriately counterbalancing Jess on the end of the pattern. And B, because of the nature of the connection, because she had the autonomy to follow it the way she chose, like she had much more autonomy in the situation, she was able to manage her own energy and momentum instead of being at the mercy of something that Robert was throwing her into. Sometimes it's better on fast songs to give your partner more autonomy, as long as you're providing that counterbalance at the end. So whatever energy is going into the beginning of the pattern needs to be counterbalanced on the other end by a leader. Oftentimes that means that the faster the song, the more energy there is to counterbalance. But newsflash, you can lead a low energy one in a fast song. I'm not going to go on a tangent there because I feel like I would get very salty.
Erin said, please do, please start.
Okay, so this is Tales from Cassie's comp floor. I have this awful problem, and it's like a perfect storm because I am a large person. I'm 5'11" in flats. Sometimes I'm wearing heels, and I'm a very large person. I am by no means a twig. And I feel that what happens is a lot of leaders, like the ones who don't know me and who don't dance with me often, see this large follow in front of them and assume I can't move, let alone fast. So they do this thing where they're like, yeet! But then on the other end, there is zero counterbalance.
Yeah.
So a lot of energy has been put into making me move, and I can move. I am a very responsive follow, and I can move alarmingly fast. It can scare people. But if a leader is asking me to put in that much energy, they need to be able to counterbalance it on the other end. It's physics. Because I could slow myself down from that speed, but then I wouldn't be on time anymore. Or I would look crazy because I would be like banking the end of the slot in order to anchor my head here. Like if I was yeeted that way, I'd be like, brace! Which, functional, but not going to get me into finals, right?
Yeah.
So understanding that whatever amount of energy you're asking to follow at the front end of a slot, you need to be able to counter that equal and opposite on the other end. Mm-hmm. So if you're leading a follow who you realize if that body plus momentum would take you out like a strike at the bowling alley, don't give them so much energy in the first place and it'll be fine. Okay, I think that's I was succinct. It was a short detour. I think I'm doing good.
Erin had said, I need to know how to high energy one, and then so Newton's law. And I'm glad we went on this tangent.
Yay. Thank you for encouraging me. I'm glad I'm not on screen because I feel like I'm blushing. But that happens to me all the time. Every time it gets to the fast song in a prelim or a semi, even a final, because like I'm like, oh no. Yeah. The other thing that happens is they're so not grounded that they think they led a one, and I felt nothing.
That's true. Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, I'm a good follow. I'll move. But because they started the bad connection, and because of them, I'm disengaged. They're like, oh no, I have to move. And then they pass me. And then because they're tinier than me, most often than not, they can do that more efficiently than I can. So the leader ends up having more body flight than me, which makes me look bad. It's exhausting. Just learn how to ground your anchors and lead a one from your weight transfer instead of the 1 foot strike and no yeeting. That's all I want for Christmas. Thanks. Okay. All right. Back to Sling Shots.
Something though. I frequently also get thrown down the slot, and I am a rather small person. So I have an idea that it is because a lot of follows don't have really good body flight, which is something to learn if you don't know how to control that. So
did we do an episode on body flight?
Maybe.
If I did, I'll link it above in the replay.
Yeah,
I will find it.
We've done a lot of episodes. It's hard to remember at this point.
I know. I think this is episode 55. Who are we?
Something like that. Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyways, we can go back. I just wanted to add that in.
No, that's a very good point. It's all a perfect storm. So basically, if you're a student of dance and you're trying to get better, find a teacher who can actually get to the root of what's causing your issues. Patreon.com/Nerdy WCS. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Back to the Sling Shot. So we covered trading places. I want to, because it's apparent in this example, but also the ones we've already covered, the way Jess is shaped, landing on that count 2, because there's a very complex amount of contra body that happens for a follow on count 2. Because if you're following an inside roll, for example, your foot strikes are the same, but you're more rotated to the right because you're about to turn to the left. In a slingshot, you are also about to turn to the left, and yet you are somehow paradoxically prepped to the left, but also to the right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I think that comes from.
Aaron said you lost me.
I'm sorry. I'm getting there. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy by getting Alicia's reaction first before going into the explanation. So, Jess is rotated to the left, turned away from us in this moment, right? However, if they had these hands connected at this point, there would be tension in that handhold. Do you agree, Alicia?
Yeah.
So just because from a bird's eye view, here I am with a darned bird's eye view again. Just because Jess's body is rotated to her upper body is rotated to her left does not mean she's pushing in that direction with the right hand. No. Oh no, I feel like Bailey Sarian. Nay. It would be engaged this way. So it's this weird thing where as a torso, you're rotated to the left, but your right shoulder is tucked back. You're tucking that scapula back in order to create tension in the right hand. So you're rotated both left and right at the same time.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah. For those of you fellows who have just encountered this information for the first time, I encourage you to go back and listen again. Because I'm actually not sure I have ever formally been taught that.
Yeah.
I just had to figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
The idea that like, yes, my upper body is turned to the left, but my right shoulder is still pulled back. And it's like I'm pinching something. So that way I'm getting tension out of my right hand instead of compression.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, that's what the prep is. But then once the leader has you over this foot, they may or may not, you'll get a compression because you're running into their hand. But if they know what they're doing, they won't let that compression ricochet you out of their hand. They will then absorb it into tension to keep turning you.
Yeah.
Yeah. The really good leaders, you actually won't encounter any compression right here on a slingshot until after the rotation.
Yeah.
Okay, getting super nerdy. I don't know if any of that made sense. Okay.
I think so.
Okay, cool.
Aaron said, so there'll be a pulling feeling, but not a push compression till the end.
Yeah. So here, let's go back to the Sean and Jessica. So right here is where there could start being some compression in the hand to shoot the follow away from you. But before then, it's more tension. In this one, I think it's mostly tension the whole way because of the way Jen is interpreting the lead. Jess! What is wrong with me? Anyways.
No, we're doing good though. So.
I know. I always feel I adore Jess so much. We're friends. What is wrong with me? Like,
Aaron said it's just Thursday.
It's just Thursday. Yes. Jess, I love you. If you're watching this, you know I love you. Okay. Okay, so yeah, this one, just the way she's following it, she's allowing it to remain tension for longer. But sometimes what happens is at this point where you're both pitched towards each other, you have compression in the hands that you can then push into more on either side, and that's what shoots you both away from each other.
Yeah, I mean, the other way to think about it is that pulling feeling is what's going to lead that forward movement and the rotation, and then the compression is to settle away from each other.
Yeah. All right, we've got one more example if my screen share will stop. And now we're moving on to a non-Jessica McCurdy one. So hopefully I am not in danger messing up names. Okay, so we've got John Lindo and Courtney Adair. I have queued it up a little extra early because it's funny. The thing that John does to Courtney, just pay attention to Sean in the back left. Like, because in the chat, watch the shenanigans 2 or 3 times. And then we will get to analyzing. To the screen share. All right. So after this, we have the end of turning basic because they're in closed position, settling Courtney into a closed position anchor. The main difference is you don't have to do as much trading places work when you're starting in closed position, and especially if you're staying in closed position. So what you'll see is John is doing a really genius thing by just not actually traveling anywhere. He's just shifting his torso over and then counterbalancing her on the other side. And that's helping create that kind of trading places feeling. And then the other reason is because the slot is just shorter when going from closed to closed. Because if we go back to the beginning, like if they were in open, Courtney would be over here, and asking her to end up over here from there would be very unreasonable. But when you're in closed position, she's just going from here to there. And that's 3 steps. That is completely doable in the time allotted in a slingshot. So this time, let's pay attention to Courtney's rotation. So we have count 1, count 2. John does a really amazing job of rotating her on that left foot. You can kind of see how the way he's supporting her on her axis is allowing her right foot to kind of ghost across the floor. Like, it's quite satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
But often what happens is like the blender thing I was talking about earlier. Leaders who don't understand the distinction between the rotation and the send away portion at the end of the slingshot tend to blur them together.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is right here, it ends up just kind of shoving the follow onto their right foot. So instead of having the foot slightly out ahead of them, they end up usually completely centered over that foot. And then the away action forces their center past their foot.
Mm-hmm.
And if a follow doesn't have the skill to kind of like cut that off before they fall over, because usually if a leader does that, they don't know that they need to counter it. So then the follow is literally left hanging. All been there. Leave a comment down below, follows, if you have experienced this thing. All right, next thing we're going to pay attention to is that slight airplaning. So we saw it to an extreme with Sean and Jess, to a lesser extreme with Maxence and Tara, to like kind of barely anything with Robert and Jess. But here with John, he's doing ever so slight of an airplane. Super minor. It's interesting. I'm trying to think of functionally what the airplane does. And I think what it does is it helps have this kind of like downward settling action onto the 2 for the follow, and then they come up out the end. So this is count 2 because they're sending them down. And then just by nature of sending someone, you get an equal and opposite reaction out the other end.
Mm-hmm.
I usually only do that if I'm in the kind of Sean mindset where it's like, yeah, I want this to look big.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, my basic slingshot tends not to have any airplaning.
Right.
I just keep it level, but that I think is an opinion thing.
Yeah.
So we just didn't really find any examples in our video perusing of one that ended up being level the whole way.
Right. Yeah.
So, but no, that is an option. I want you to pay attention to what John's left or right elbow is. I can't words. My brain just keeps spitting out the wrong words tonight, Alicia.
Erin said, "What's airplaning again?"
Oh, so that's the well, bam. That's airplaning. So I want you to pay attention to how it's very minor, but John's right elbow is coming towards his torso here. It's moving down the slot, and his arm is supinated into his back. So his elbow is dropped and pointed to the floor, as opposed to being pronated and lifted up like a ballroom arm. It's dropped down, and then he's bringing that downward elbow into his body. And that is really important, because another thing that happens a lot of the time is a leader who has less experience with slingshots will go straight into rotation before the follow's left foot has even touched the floor. So imagine if right here, her foot has no weight on it, like it's still hovering off the ground. Imagine if in this moment, while a lot of her weight is still on her right foot, John was like, "Down to your left." Chaos ensues. So regardless of whether you're leading.
Erin said, "Could you say that one more time?"
Chaos ensues. So regardless of whether you're leading a slingshot that starts in closed or starts in open, it's really important that you prioritize direction first, and you follow through with that direction until the follow has started applying weight to their left foot. Once they have started applying weight, you can then add rotation, and your priority is rotation, not direction. And then after the follow has finished rotating, you can apply more direction. So the recipe for a slingshot is direction, rotation, direction. Do not throw them in a blender. I think that's a good summary of what we've covered tonight.
Yeah.
Don't throw them in a blender. And then for the love of all that is holy, counterbalance your follow on the other end.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for coming to my hour and 10-minute TED Talk. Are there any more questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or put them in the chat.
So I have a question about the rotation.
Yes.
So like I said, I just looking at it, I know you talked about like rotating your frame, but how much of that is like the hips rotating and then the frame following the hips?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you always want the torso initiating the movement, and then you want to think about the arms are doing the same movement but to a larger degree. So if your torso is going from a 45 over here to a 45 over here, your arms are going from a 180 to a 180. So your arms have slightly more range of motion, but it's all originating from the torso. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was what I figured, but I just wanted to.
That was a good point. There's so much to talk about in a slingshot.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate the questions, because we could literally talk about them for hours.
There's a lot of ways to do it wrong.
Yes. Yeah. My personal favorite is open to open, where I let go of my left hand as a leader, follower's right hand once the rotation is over. And then without that tether on the left side of my body, I can then shoot them out farther to my left. That's my personal favorite. I feel like I'm ordering coffee at Starbucks. Like, like super specific. I also love leading a combination of slingshot and closed with like forward ochos. Yeah, that can be fun. Ochos. That's another one we should do an episode on, because that's another one I get super fussy about.
I mean, that's another one that there's a lot of ways to do it wrong. Like, generally, I feel like here we're pretty much like, there's a lot of ways you can do it right. With these specifically, there's a lot of ways you can do it wrong.
Basically. And so much of it comes down to is when you're first learning them, you tend to throw the steps into a blender instead of distinguishing them. Thank you all so much for joining us on this extra zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing.
Yeah.
I am certain the outtakes to follow in the replay will be glorious.
Probably, yeah. See you all next time. What are we covering next time?
Trading places. So
right.
This, but in more basic patterns than a slingshot.
Yeah, pretty much. All righty. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you later. Maybe.
I found the button right away this time. It's many clicks between me and the sharing.
It reminds me of every time that Emma has joined us, and then it takes her at least a solid minute to find the button to leave at the end.
Yeah, that's me with the screen share. Why didn't you go back? Oh, there wasn't a bookmark? But I made a bookmark, I swear. Okay. A lot's been going on today, people. I'm sorry. So that was just satisfying to watch the rest of it. Sorry. I have this habit of getting mesmerized by Jessica. I'm probably not the only one.
No, I don't think
like,
so.
Ooh, shiny. All right. I accidentally said Jessica McCabe the last time and I put I edited it in the replay saying McCurdy with an asterisk, and then threw in the Jean-Luc Picard palm face gif over it because that felt appropriate. Also, at the end of that episode, you got like 2% sassy with me, and it was beautiful. And so I put in that oh man, the actor that plays Star-Lord, that gif of him from Parks and Rec where he's like, whoa. Yeah. Anyways, I am so sorry, people. I am like off my rocker tonight. So back to the beginning of this. Wrong button. I'm tired. I don't know about you, but when I get tired, my like hand gets stiff. So fine motor control with the mouse.
Yeah.
It's something to shoot for, but you don't get there. And so you're like, I'm going to click this. Your brain's like, I'm going to click this little thing.
Yeah.
Do you click that? No. You click the thing 2 things over. That's what just happened to me. Okay. I can't decide if the plaid shirt is helpful for seeing things or not.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. The things my brain thinks about. All right. Is there anything else I want to get fussy about in this particular example? Please hold. Hi, are you back?
Hi. Sorry, my internet decided that it didn't want to work for a hot second. So
Awesome. I couldn't tell. I was like, Andrew, can you hear me? Because I'm never sure if it's me or not.
No, that's me and my internet deciding that it wants to stop working randomly.
Awesome.
At any time, really.
Good time.
Anywho.
All right.
I love Chris's reaction in the background.
He's like, oh
Just
no.
like, oh no.
We
What did I
weren't
just
supposed
witness?
to see that. I also love McBenry's reaction, because he kind of does the same thing as he like checks with Sean, and then he's like, okay, yes, I shall make the same similar what the fuck hand motion. It's just so good.
We're all on the
Anyways.
same page.
All on the same page is great. So hopefully that answers that question.
Mm-hmm.
I had to resist going in my plane banking.
Got it.